Hello, this is James Hudnall, and welcome to another episode of Creative Secrets. This one is episode 24, and it's about relational characterization. Now, you may have wondered, what makes a character three-dimensional? Well, first, before we answer that question, we should answer what is a one-dimensional and two-dimensional character. One-dimensional is you only see one side of the character. That's it. You just see them as angry or happy. You never see any other action or behavior from them other than one note. Now, you could see a walk-on character that's just there for a few seconds as being a one-dimensional character because they're only there to pass a line or to create an emotional moment. But let's talk about two-dimensional characters. Two-dimensional characters are characters where you only see two sides of them. You see them angry or happy. A good example of a two-dimensional character would be in a 1990s comic book where the only expression the character has is either angry and angrier or gritty and grim. There's a lot of comic book characters, for example, that would do this, but you also see in movies where you just see one note of a character and then maybe a slight shade of that character's personality. The trouble with this is you're basically creating caricatures. You're not creating characters when you create those characters. They should serve a purpose, which all characters do in a story, but if you give a little bit more dimension to people, it makes them seem more real, and it fleshes out the scene and makes it seem more like real people. Actors in a movie can often do that. They can lend a little bit more personality to a character so that it's not so wooden. In a comic book or a novel, then it's just up to the artist or the writer to be able to pull off these things, and a lot of times those people fail to do that. We've seen that over and over again in stories and fiction. Now, in the case of a story, you really need only to focus too heavily on this for the major characters, not for the minor characters. A lot of characters that come and go in a story are just supporting characters on some level. They only need to be as fleshed out as is necessary for their purpose in the story. However, it's always good if you give some humanity to every character, no matter how minor they are. It's just as long as it doesn't interfere with your goal, which is to keep the story streamlined and effective. Now let's talk about three-dimensional characters. And a three-dimensional character is one in which we see different aspects of the character's personality. And by seeing the different aspects of the personality, we get a better understanding of that person as a whole. Thus, they seem more fleshed out and real to us and to the audience. And this is the goal that you want to achieve, especially for your main characters. You want them to feel like individual people and not just characters in a story. You really want your characters to feel like people as much as possible. You want people to invest time into those characters where they feel for those characters. They relate to those characters. They identify with those characters. Not all characters will be identifiable or relatable, but you should still accept them as people. Just as in a good story, a villain is somebody you may not want to identify with, but you can relate to them on some level. You can understand where they're coming from. That is a good characterization. I'll get into that in more detail in the heroes and villains videos. But for now, let's just talk about how to create this effect. Okay, so first of all, you have to understand that every person in real life, such as yourself, has people in their life that affects them in different ways. So for example, you relate to your mother differently than you relate to your brother or sister, if you have one. You relate to your boss differently than you do to your spouse. Now imagine that there's a third person in the room that's observing invisibly everything that goes on. So every time you, let's say, are talking to somebody in your life, that third person is the audience. They're the ones who determine what kind of person you are, what kind of character you are, based on the way you interact with other people. This is the way an audience member will react to your story. When they observe the way the character treats other people in their lives, they're getting a side of them. Now, how a person talks to their mother or their best friend or their enemy or their lover is different, and it shows whether they have a good or bad relationship, whether it's a positive or negative, whether it's constructive or destructive. Now, the characters themselves may not know about this, because a lot of times we do stuff instinctively when we're talking to somebody like that in our lives, but we may feel it. We obviously feel it. And to an outside observer, which is your audience, they're judging or evaluating the relationship, and they're getting a sense of that character from that relationship and from the way they talk. So you need to think carefully about the dialogue between characters in those scenes. Moreover, you also need to create those scenes. You need to have scenes in your story that shows different sides of the characters, from the hero to the villain, so that we have a sense of their personality beyond just the one that they present to the public. We all have a facade that we present to the public as our real selves, but they are not our real selves. They're the side that we choose to present to people. They're not necessarily what kind of person we are inside. I like to think that my outside is similar to my inside, but that's not usual. And I could be deluding myself, who knows? But the question is, your character is going to have their outside personality, and they may not even be aware of their inside personality. Or they might be aware of it, and they might have massive insecurities. That's all part of their characterization that you need to understand going forward. You also need to have other characters to reveal chinks in their armor, to reveal the sides of their personality and their weaknesses and strengths. This is how we give them the depth of the character. The audience needs it, because without it, they can't really hold on to that character as a person. They can't get a sense of that person. And we definitely want a story to feel like there's more there than just the surface. One of the problems with a lot of fiction is they just do the surface stuff. They just show the surface personality of the characters, and the story is just a surface over a very thin plot. And that's why we come out of a lot of things feeling disappointed or underwhelmed, and we forget about the stuff. We, as creative people, do not want to do that. Hopefully you won't want to do that. We want to create a facsimile of reality that the audience can relate to, and the characterization is a very important part of that. And finally, the thing that you need to think about here in creating three-dimensional characters is, what are their voices? Whether you realize it or not, we all have different voices that we use to talk to people, depending on what effect we want to make in that particular situation. So we have our angry voice, we have our seductive voice, we have our funny voice, we have our normal voice. This is something women especially know very well, because they practice it a lot. But everyone practices it. When they're a little kid, when you're a little kid, you learn to talk to your parents with different voices so you could manipulate them to get what you wanted. Because every character in reality is always trying to get what they want. So it's the same for people in your story, and the same for you and everyone in your life. The way that you talk to people is your way of trying to manipulate them on some level, whether consciously or unconsciously, to get what you want. You're either trying to pass information to them that's your perspective that you want people to believe, or you're trying to lead them to a conclusion, either positively or negatively, for a goal that you have in mind. You're trying to get something from someone, and so are your characters. The characters in your story are trying to get something from someone, and they're trying to use their voices to achieve that. So if they think they can get that by screaming at someone, they will. If they think they can get that way by being seductive, they will. And by the choice of voices that they use, it tells us a lot about that character, because like I said in the last video, the choices the character makes tells us a lot about them. It shows what they're willing to do to get what they want. And that goes for every single character in your story. Of course, you don't want to overpower it by having every single character acting like a maniac. The point is that every character will approach a subject from a different angle, and it depends on the personality of that character, and it tells you a lot about them, what words they choose to use, what words they choose not to use. I'll get into a lot more detail in the dialogue section when I get there, but for now you get this sense of what I'm talking about. So that's another thing you want to think about when you proceed from here. Okay, that's it for now. I will get to you next time with another characters video. Please like this video. Please subscribe if you haven't done so. Please check the links below. Please tell your friends. I would really appreciate it. All the likes I get is a big help. All the comments I get are a big help. So that's it for now, and I will talk to you later. Bye.